Every woman needs to take that universal path to find self-worth, a voice, and a cherished life. That path is the heroine's journey, the roadmap to an amazing adventure that women travel to discover their true selves. The heroine's journey is not about getting on your superpowers and going out to fight the lions, tigers, and bears of the outside world with your might. That would be the hero's journey. This woman's journey is the internal journey that a woman takes to grow her courage and strength and travel to her best life.
Heroines, so glad you're here. And I've got exciting news. The Heroine's Journey book is out and for you. It's going to show you how your life can move along so beautifully and gracefully. Go get the book now at heroinesbook.com. Journey onward. Jessica Hartung, welcome. We're so happy to have you on the podcast with us today. It's such a treat for me to have many of my favorite women come back and share their stories and their wisdom. I think that's what's wonderful about podcasts and social media and things that are going on right now.
Oh,
is
yes.
We can collaborate. And as you're going to tell us, collaboration is the talent of women. So Here we are, ready to collaborate. I'm going to first introduce you by saying that we met in a really spontaneous, joyful way. We were both at a retreat, and we ended up sitting in the lobby of the retreat. Actually, what's the name of the retreat? It was
World Changing Women, the World Changing Women's Conference.
That's right. And where was it? It was at a beautiful retreat
Yeah,
Santa Cruz
in Santa Cruz. Yep.
Yeah. And we ended up sitting in the lobby and started talking and just kind of fell in love with each other.
Yeah. And I remember you had a real financial feminine focus, and I loved the way those came together. But now it seems you're evolving as we all are. So, I can't wait to hear a little bit more about how you've moved in your thinking and in your work to focus on the heroine's journey, because I think that's so important right now.
And we'll dive into that. And I'm going to be totally truthful with you in my answer because
Okay.
I have a hidden agenda.
Oh, okay.
And I've been practicing this hidden agenda throughout my whole life. So this is one more evolution in that process. And if I declare it, my hidden agenda is for women to understand about money. But what I know is that men and women process money very differently. So my first book, as you know, was called A Girl Needs Cash. And quite frankly, in A Girl Needs Cash, I always felt like I was putting a pink skirt on a pig. Okay. What I was doing was I was translating the male point of view when it came to money into a method or a conversation that I hoped that women could become a part of. Well, that left me feeling very unsatisfied because men and women see money very differently. We're going to talk about in our conversation here why men and women, have different paths in life. And this is very typical when it comes to money, that it's the same thing. But what I've discovered is that if I say to a man, hey, would you like to come to my options course? I'll teach you all about options. Most men will jump right in and say, yeah, great, love to be there, all in. If I say that same thing to a woman, she'll say, and I'll fire off a million questions in her head. Am I smart enough to understand that? What grade am I in when it comes to money? Why do I need to know that? How's that going to help my life?
Yeah.
So what you did is you've just blocked their ability to engage in the conversation. So the heroine's journey is a new approach because women need it to be integrated. They need the different pieces of their life to speak together so that it's meaningful to their whole life.
Well, I just have to say, Joan, the last business that I started was integrated work. And it was for that very reason, how we bring who we are to what we do. We need to have integration for the fact that that makes it meaningful. So I just wanted to underscore that because, in a very feminine way, I came to that point in my business where I had, my career, I had started even as a very young person as an entrepreneur. I wanted to go with the marching band to Mexico, and my parents said, "Oh no, we're not paying for that." So I became an Avon lady. and, and I learned about inventory and I learned about a lot of business things while I was trying to accomplish something else. I wasn't going into business because I wanted to be in business. I was going into business because I needed the money to be able to fund something that I felt would be fulfilling to me. And I used that method again and again. In college, I became a consultant. I got a job as a telemarketer, so I became a consultant in telemarketing. And then later, I formed a leadership development firm, and that's when integrated work came to being. That was right after a computer consulting firm, which was Macinteach, and I did Macintosh training and consulting for a long time. So, the general principle of find a need and fill it, is kind of that entrepreneurial version. But when it comes to being a feminine entrepreneur, I think we are also integrating our feminine and masculine tendencies in order to be able to be successful in business. It's not like we are one or the other. It's that we have both in balance and hopefully in balance.
But coming into the world, when I worked on Wall Street, I looked around and I said, "What is successful?" And I wore those heavy men's suits,
Yes.
and
Yes.
the Oxford shirts, and I did, the bras that pushed you in, and I did everything to look like the man and be like the man. But
Yes.
you're suggesting we can't be men because we're women and we have this essential nature and we have something to bring to the party because we
Yes.
are women, and that gives us a different perspective. So your femininity just couldn't be capped.
Yes, yes. And I've been a part of executive roundtables. For 5 years, I was in a Vistage group, which is a CEO roundtable. And there was another woman some of the time, but most of the time I was the only woman. And what I really noticed is just the different mindsets about what's happening, how we interpret information. And so, yes, I was a very valuable member of that group because I saw things differently. And also, I got great value from seeing the perspective of the men on the issues that I was facing. It really helped me to have that kind of counsel. So I have always pictured, feminism is not against masculine or against men. It's looking at ourselves to say, what is it that we have to offer, and particularly what's unique about the way we approach things. And I tend to be a visionary type. What pulls me forward is not the plan and the steps. What pulls me forward is the vision of the future that I see and I feel, and that draws me towards that future, as opposed to having a plan. And that is a very basic way that I see the masculine and the feminine sometimes feel like they're in conflict. But in fact, they support each other. You both need a vision and clear steps and a plan. It's not an either or, it's a both and.
And in that group, you really had to protect your feminine nature because
Yes.
everything sitting around you was masculine. And it's been too easy for us as women to look at that and say, that's the success path. I should go be a man.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard for men to know, and when they're sharing their advice, are they sharing something that is useful to us or something that is counter to what we need to do? I had a very good experience writing my first book, The Conscious Professional. I had both a husband and wife team that both contributed to the developmental editing. And I really noticed the difference in their styles about what the gal would say and what the guy would say and how it would affect me, and how valuable it is to have both perspectives. But unfortunately, most of us are raised inside of structures that are not very feminine friendly.
Yeah,
So we have to
we
find our
have to
own
put
ways to
exclamation
value that.
marks around that.
Yeah,
And that's actually
exactly.
the heroine's journey is much about that, because in the heroine's journey, we say that the path of a woman has to be to claim your self-worth so you can use your voice. And so
Yes.
much in our culture diminishes our self-worth. You could easily sit in a room full of men and think, they know, I don't. We've stepped it up over the years, but still taking that position and knowing that we have something to bring that's unique is all about where we are right now.
I found that as a young girl too. I was reading some journals of mine, and in my family, I had a very smart brother, a very smart father, and the kind of dominance of the man's way of thinking and the kind of science orientation, the history orientation, all of that is very steeped in men who are out in front. There have been women behind the scenes, but um, that structure. And I wrote in my journal that I need to learn to trust my intuitive wisdom and my sense of inner knowing as much as I trust some of the external ways of knowing that I've been taught. And that was a pretty young girl to have that observation. I was surprised when I reread it recently because I'm still working on that. I'm still working
Exactly.
on both hearing that still small voice within
Uh-huh.
and then having the confidence to be able to move forward in connection and collaboration with the different parts of ourself. I think that there's a metaphor around collaboration in partnership is how do we partner and collaborate with the different dimensions of ourselves. Certainly, I probably have had, who knows, lifetimes as a man. I don't know. I'm a kind of a cosmic gal, so it sort of permeates between different lifetimes. But I have a sense of the masculine. I can behave in ways that are very respected in business. But I also have parts of me that are intuitive, that are knowing in a different way. And so reconciling and integrating those parts within myself keeps me whole. And honestly, that kind of whole healed self is really what it means to be professional these days. That
Yeah.
level of professionalism that comes when we're not trying to satisfy our ego through the interactions. We're not trying to put others down to make us feel better. And, sometimes women, men, all of us can fall into those different traps. But I think the idea of integration and bringing together in a healthy way the different dimensions so that we can go forward as a whole person. That's what I really strive for.
Because that's authentic. All
Yes.
you're saying is you want to be your authentic self.
Yes.
Which is it's a big part of the heroine's journey to let our natures blossom and be who we truly are. So
Yes.
why do you think that men and women have different paths to maturity in life?
Well, it's interesting the Joseph Campbell and the power of myth and some of the archetypal ways that we've looked at the hero's journey. Um, there are aspects of that is very solitary. This warrior goes out and triumphs and gets the bounty and usually the girl and the money, and those are the things that he wins by being a hero.
The
And
rewards. And
or the
he always has a weapon.
Yes, yes. And it really is relying on his inner strength and masculine powers in order to succeed.
I
Whereas
would say it's relying on his outer strength.
outer strength, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes. And in the heroine's journey, there were a couple of things that I find really struck me is that the asking for help, the collaboration, the working with others, is how we move forward most successfully. And there's a give and take in that. It's not all about what I need; it's about what we need. I ran a business for 20 years with about 15 employees, and building that team in a collaborative learning way where together we were learning. Certainly there were men who could participate in it and did, but the structure of it, and that was why I formed my own company, is so that I could run it in a way that felt more stable and consistent, and effective for me. Now, as a mentor, I do conscious business women's circles. And that's where women are learning and collaborating collectively together. Now, can we also have circles like that with men? Sure. But we want to make sure that they're coming into our structure versus us coming into their structure, which is how it tends to be in business.
I have a funny story that taught me so much at the time that it happened. And you know that I spent my career working on Wall Street, in
Mhm.
highly testosterone laden
Yes.
trading floors. And I have this quirky personality that I like to blow things up. So on Monday morning, I had this big fishbowl on the corner of my desk, and I would come in on Monday morning with this big, beautiful bunch of yellow tulips.
Oh,
Put it right in the trading floor. Magnificent. It inspired me. It helped me do my work. It made me feel in my best creative self,
hmm
and hated it so
really?
much that they hated it that they literally wanted to throw me right off the trading floor.
Wow.
And that was probably my first indication of kind of the different paths that we both take. It was way, way, way in that testosterone laden environment. The beauty they just couldn't
It was
handle.
a distraction.
It was. Yeah.
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 I used to, when I was a new facilitator, I'd come into a room. I worked in nonprofits, government. These are pretty staid, organizations, institutions that have been around for a long time. And so coming to a retreat or a meeting, yet again, da, 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 we've done this a million times. And when they walk in the room and there's music and flowers on the table, all of
Yeah.
a sudden everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute, something's different here. This is going to be a different kind of meeting, isn't it? And so I absolutely utilized that shock, to the advantage of having real strategic thinking where people's minds are opened up a little bit. Even when you're sitting inside of a very bland government building, you can still have beauty. You can still have this kind of elevated conversation, but it requires, some facilitation and some forethought. Otherwise, things tend to gravitate back towards, kind of the nuts and bolts. And, we can have lots of nuts and bolts conversations, but it's not going to move us forward strategically.
Heroines, thanks for being with me. There's a really big idea that I want to tell you about, and that's the heroine's journey. Are you like worried or concerned about your life? I was. Has something big come along and just rocked you? Maybe thrown your apple cart straight up in the air. And when you ask yourself, are you really living the life of joy, prosperity, and freedom that you want to live? You know, life is for us to enjoy, not for us to suffer through. And that's what the heroine's journey is all about. It's your roadmap to a life that you love. You can have it. It's at theheroinesbook.com. I've written it for you. I can't wait for you to read it. And I'd love you to give me your feedback. Well, what it taught me too was that we do have different paths. I mean, that was all kind of the experience that led me to write my book. But I couldn't let myself be taken out of my own creative space. So as soon
Mm-hmm.
as I saw that happening, I decided I was going and the tulips were going with me.
Oh, very
And that's
good.
when I started my own business because I had to live and work in a culture where I could express my own creative ability and bring to the world what I had to bring to the world. And if
Beautiful.
I let that overwhelming, there was even anger really over tulips.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I left that, if I succumbed to that, I could never become authentic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was very visual to me about men and women do have different paths, and somehow we need to protect ourselves so that we can have our self worth and claim our voice inside that environment and bring to the world the gifts and talents that we uniquely have. And I would
Right.
guess wanting to do that was what led you to write your book.
Yes. I had, there's an interesting story I was thinking about from my young person days. When I was a kid, I used to pack a lunch and get on my bike, and I would look down and I would look at the street and the sidewalk, and I would just keep going and turning and going and get myself lost on purpose. So I would have some lunch when I was thoroughly lost, and then I would spend my time finding my way home. And I liked that. I liked that sense of discovery and adventure and the unknown and the serendipity that happens along the way. I've kind of just sort of what I used to say, following my nose. It's just whatever catches my attention, I would move in that direction. And I didn't realize at the time, but that takes a lot of courage. To me, it was just the natural way I was. My other girlfriends weren't doing that because they were nervous about getting lost. They were afraid. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it didn't occur to me to be afraid. But it's the same thing as entrepreneurship. You don't know when you start a business or when you hire that first or that fifth or that 10th employee, you don't know. Is it
Right.
really going to work out? Am I going to be, but there's a leap of courage. So I think writing a book is the same way. I'll be honest with you. I had a goal to improve 1 million work lives by 2025.
Nice. Uh-huh.
And I thought this was down in much, 7, 8 years ago. And I thought, there's no way that I can do this one on one. It's not possible. So I've got to translate. I've got to take the knowledge that I have had from these one-on-one experiences where people have made work-life transformations. I know that it has made a difference. I need to document that and sort of share the dynamics of it. So I broke it down into 24 of the most common on the job development and gave the tools to people so that I'm sure love to be the one that is in a coaching position and consulting with people. But when we talk about, let's say, something as fundamental as dealing with mistakes or managing up or dealing with delegation, these things, I felt like I just kept repeating myself and going through this with each new person. I thought, this doesn't make sense. What I really need to do is package this in some way so that someone can consume it and bring it into their own lives without having to pay for a coach. So the idea is to make it, every job has ways to learn. And I became very passionate about people getting what I called their third paycheck. It's not enough to just get paid financially for your work. People are also looking for the second paycheck, which is the emotional satisfaction, right? So you want to get paid well, you want to have emotional satisfaction, but unfortunately, most people are not getting their third paycheck. Well, what's the third paycheck? It's the learning and growth.
Yeah.
It's the development we take with us forever. right? Because even though those situations that you were in on Wall Street, you didn't like everything about it, you took with you the learning and development and then translated it into your next adventure. This is what executives do. And I felt it's important that everyone understand, whether you're administrative assistant or a project manager or a C-suite, you're leveraging your work to get your third paycheck, that growth and development that you can take with you. And what I found from that is because I'm a woman and because I have a very integrated view, is that your home life, the relationships, those things benefit from your third paycheck as well, because you don't just throw out your project management knowledge. You use that when you're planning a vacation. You use that when you're planning a construction project in your house, you know. So what I really found is the interplay between the personal and professional really came into play with development. And as people developed personally through whatever means they used, their professional capabilities grew. And as their professional capabilities grew, they became on more solid ground personally. So I think this is one of the ways that our work lives can transform our lives. That's why I wanted folks to focus on their third paycheck. The other reason being that if you build those skills and they're transferable, marketable skills, you're also going to increase your first paycheck by doing that.
Erin, you're nodding your head. What comes to mind to you for?
Well, listening to Jessica talking about the three paychecks, I have never thought about it that way, but it's true. Like the thing that is the most transferable is that third paycheck.
Yeah.
And those transferable skills make the ultimate difference in terms of how you feel about yourself, how you think about what you can do next, and how you, if we want to put it into the perspective of the home life, like how you interact with your children, and even more particularly your daughters, you know, and what they get to see in terms of what mommy has done, and has achieved and has grown.
Yes. And competence breeds confidence.
Yes. And I hear you saying too, at the very beginning, is you have to, like when you got on that bike, you have to have the courage and strength to stand up so that you can speak your voice. And then you had the desire through your book to put your voice out into the world. But as both you and I know, like you have to develop some tough skin because, you know, you get out there and the arrows come after you.
And I think that that's why I mentioned the story about me as a young girl, is because I built confidence and had some skill with finding my way out of a unknown situation. I actually created an adversity for myself so that I could solve it. As a parent, what I chose to do is create small adversities that would lift up my children just a little bit more, give them a challenge, but not something so great that you're throwing them in the, you know, the deep end of the pool, right? So that folks have a chance to build that third paycheck, even if they're not employed, but they're building their capability to rely on themselves. And then that gives more confidence to rely on myself when the stakes are really high.
And you just described the heroine's journey, because that's what happens on the heroine's journey is you get put in these spots of unknown and you have to solve your way out of it. And then another unknown. And then you go, oh my God, I don't have the skill. What do I do? Well, then you take a look at it and you go, how do I go get that skill? You know, and what do I need to do next? And how do I need to do it so that I can continue to move forward? Because where I'm going is to a life of joy, prosperity, and freedom.
Yeah.
And as long as you hold that view and say, I want to be the heroine, I don't want to be the victim. You know, the person that your friends who didn't get on the bike, they didn't build the skill. And sometimes we have to look at adversity and go, come on. You know, like I didn't like getting divorced, but oh my God, I would never change it for a minute now because of all that I had to learn to do and be to go forward. And as I went forward, that authenticity in me, the courage grew, the strength grew. I got to be more authentic, and you get to stand out with your voice,
Well, and that's consistent with the research on literature. So, sorry, the research on leadership. The 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 research on leadership shows that it's those adverse situations that we work through that grow our leadership the most. Center for Creative Leadership documented the different ways people grow, by training program, mentoring, a difficult assignment, a crisis. And they found that the difficult assignments, the crises, the things that are unexpected and super challenging. Because it's challenging, it gets us out on what I call that developmental edge, where things are kind of jagged. It's tough, and from a little girl's perspective, you've ridden your bike somewhere, you have no idea where you are, there are no cell phones.
Yeah.
You have that panic. And at the same time, I think what I learned is that panic is short-lived. And it's not the worst thing in the world.
It only
it's
lasts
something
9 seconds.
There you go. And so then when you find that in your leading of others, this is why a lot of women don't want leadership roles. They don't feel confident that their direction is going to be effective for everyone, and they want to make sure it's good. And so how do they build that confidence? By taking small uncomfortable steps to grow their capability in that area. And I think I find it overall super empowering, Joan, that our brains are neuroplastic. We can modify our software through our actions and by training ourselves so that we're more capable in the areas that we need for whatever kind of success we would find fulfilling, the kind of life that you said of joy and of contribution.
Prosperity and freedom. I have a funny story to tell. So, I went to work on Wall Street when there were no women there. We were a group, there were a couple of us, but, I wasn't the first. But going to work on Wall Street, I obviously walked into those highly testosterone environments, where men behaved like men. So
Yes.
I went to work as an investment banker, underwriting and putting together big deals. So when I was first there, they would assign me to be sort of the apprentice on the deal, But then there was the stage when I wanted to step out. And so, because I wanted to run a deal. So I said to the guy that I worked for, I could do that deal. I could run that deal. And he looked at me like, he was expecting me to fail. And he said, well, okay. So then I said to him, which was such a great learning, I said to him, so how do I do it? He picked up a chair in the middle of the trading floor and threw it at me and said, just do it.
Wow.
Now, if that's not the male approach, I don't know what it was. But it did incite in me that challenge, that crisis, that point where I was like, damn you, get out of my way because I am going to do it.
Yep.
And that is a heroine's moment where you were saying over here, I'm not sure I know how to do that or what to do. And then the heroine rises in you and you say, watch me, just watch me. And I did do it, and I did a great job at it, and went on to do other things. But I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the motivational drivers that we have underneath. When we actually do say, "I'm gonna." Watch me, like noticing what gives rise to that. I think it's different for different people, but when we have that motivational driver that moves us to action, whether it's out of defiance, I certainly did plenty of it out of, you think I'm that way, I'm going to prove you wrong. But I also did it out of exploration. Can I? Is this possible for me? The only way to find out is to try. So I think that understanding ourselves, our clients, if we work with clients, to know what gives rise to that kind of strength is important because it's part of how we manage ourselves and manage when and where we apply that strength.
Because the thing of being a heroine is taking yourself from victim to heroine. And that does not occur without that moment that you're describing, where you say, I'm going to modify, I'm going to recreate, I'm going to put myself in uncomfortable situations, I'm going to try something new. I could well fail at this, but here we go.
And I will say, having worked with a lot of executive women, the consequences of failure are real.
Uh-huh.
Women in corporate worlds are often put, we've talked about the glass ceiling for years, and now we're talking about the glass cliff, where we're put up against a cliff and said, go run off. And, okay, we go do it like a good soldier, but it's designed to have us fail. And it's unlikely that it was going to succeed. And that is why it was given to a female. So there's certainly been a lot of, men can fail forward, but women often in a male-dominated environment cannot. They can't recover from a failure like that. So the risks, I think I just want to make sure we don't underestimate the risks. The risks are real. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try and find a way and get help and secure our success with everything we've got. But it does mean that not everybody's rooting for us.
For sure. And it doesn't mean that we don't have options. Because
Yes.
when I saw that in front of me and I knew that I didn't have a clean path forward in the middle of that trading floor when I had two
Mm-hmm.
on my desk, I said, what else can we do here? Oh,
Yeah.
I think I'll go get a license and do it myself.
And isn't that a creative solution? That is, I think, one of the things that we, as women, have brilliance in the way we synthesize from the different contexts that we're in and then create anew from the various ingredients in our sphere, and that kind of creativity generative creativity, I think that is something that we're very well suited for.
I have to tell you about Erin. She has a big goal in front of herself.
Oh,
And it is part of setting goals and then living up to it. Tell us what you're planning to do.
Are you talking about the PCT or are you talking about something else?
Know that.
Yeah, I have my goal, which I have set, and I now have an official start date of March 22nd to hike the Pacific Crest Trail next year. So
wow.
it's basically a trail. It's one of the long trails in the United States. It runs from the Mexican border to the Canadian border along the West Coast. It's 2,650 miles. So it'll take about 6 months.
Wow.
And it is a lot of exactly what you're talking about, Jessica, where it's preparing myself for it and doing the things, walking with the heavy pack and that kind of stuff, but also knowing that there are going to be a lot of things that are going to be scary. And even just thinking about them now makes me nervous. There's hitchhiking involved. There is, you're out, obviously you're hiking in the national and state parks, which means that you're out from civilization quite far. There's obviously wild animals. There's big wild animals.
And what gives rise? What is the motivation, the driver? Why do you want to do that?
There's a couple of different reasons, actually. One of them is to see if I can. Just pure and simple. I love testing myself against that. Like, something like this, there's a huge possibility that I don't succeed for whatever reason. So there's testing. I haven't done it for a few years now, but I also have a podcast where I was interviewing through hikers and talking to them, and the transformations that they were talking about that happen on the trail, the there's nothing like having 8 hours of nothing but walking and thinking for 6 months at a time, like
Mm-hmm.
the amount of transformation, internal transformation that occurs when you have that much time to just stop. It's very quiet. So quiet and think um, really entices me to like, let's see what comes out of that. Like, let's see what the next stage is after that. Um, and I guess the third thing is it's just, it's beautiful. Like it's beautiful out
Mm-hmm.
there. And I know that I don't personally get out there often enough. And so I guess I'm going like throw myself into the deep end side of things, but it's there's no time like the present to go out and do the things that you want to do as opposed to postponing them, which is kind of what I feel like I've done a lot for a long time. And it's like, nope,
Mm-hmm.
this time, come rain or shine, like that's where I'm going to be.
Right. Right. Oh, really, really appreciate that. And you can hear, as a coach, I spend a lot of time listening to it, just like you had shared, what about this is really important? And you can imagine that people go on that kind of a trek for a lot of different reasons. And there's no judgment about what reasons people have, but what is really essential. And I think for the heroine to feel that heroine's fire and motivation is the alignment. When we've got our clarity about what's singing to our heart and our soul, and we've also put in place the logic and the safety and the other particulars. When all of that lines up, we can feel it and it feels different. It feels glorious.
And
Yeah.
sometimes what sends us on that journey is a divorce
Yeah.
or a financial crisis that changes our life completely or
Yes.
a health issue, you know?
Well, and I have been wondering, Joan, if I should share, but I did have a mental health issue that really knocked me off my chair. I was just floored. I didn't know what was happening, couldn't understand it. And it took, some time, some intervention, some healing, and
Wow.
caused me to go back into some of my wounds of the past
Uh-huh.
and really reclaim that part of myself that
Uh-huh.
I had left hanging out there because I didn't know how to deal with it. And it was too much for me at the time. So after I transferred the leadership of the company to someone else and the ownership of the company to someone else, I had a level of freedom to explore and to deal with some stuff. So I was kind of catching up with myself, after 20 years of, working like crazy to make something
Uh-huh.
happen and feeling that commitment to all the employees and all their jobs and all their families and, just the pressure of it. Having
Uh-huh.
that relieved allowed me to have a mental health issue and
Be-
then be able to recover from it
because
and spend the time to do that in a way that leaves me whole.
because often for the first half of our life, we hero it. In other words, we go out and fight the lions, tigers, and bears because we're trying to create our safety and security. And then
Yes.
what happened to you is your heroine's journey fell on your head.
Yeah.
You didn't choose it. You didn't say, hey, I want to completely upend my life right now. That's so typical. The heroine's
Yeah.
journey falls on your head. But I'm guessing that it, like you said, it gave you the time. You had gotten to the top of the ladder, but perhaps the ladder for your life was in the wrong building.
Yes, I think that was something that I really learned is that just like you took your tulips to do your own adventure, building a company wasn't originally what I had in mind. I was wanting to build a reputation. I wanted to build a research, understand the nature of leadership and how we are successful. But really, what it came down to is that work is a developmental experience. And most folks aren't seeing it through that lens. And so I feel like the thing that I've come to do, that this book is about and the next book will also be about, is around how do we leverage the development that's right there in front of us. It's like we're saying, oh, I really need to build some muscle, and we're walking around this room with all these weights and equipment. We're not using any of it. And we're saying, I really need to build some muscles. Gee, I wonder what I could do. And it's all right there for us if we take advantage of it.
Why do you think that we don't take advantage of it?
There's something called functional fixedness. And functional fixedness is that when we see a thing, we think about what role that can play. So if I hold a pencil, I think about a pencil as a writing implement. You can erase, these are the things you can do with a pencil. You give a pencil to a gorilla, they don't think about it that way. It's a stick, it's all kinds of things, right? So functional fixedness is when we take one item and we think about, oh, this is the one way that can work. And unfortunately, we have a functional fixedness about work. This is where I make money. I do this thing in order to make money. And then if I'm trading that off with, no, I do this thing in order to feel satisfied, I'll take less money for that. What we don't do is see it as a developmental opportunity. So when I talk to folks and I say, how are you growing and learning on the job? Usually the kinds of things that come back show me that they don't see. They're walking around the weight equipment, but they don't see it as that. So I think the reason they don't see it is because we don't talk about work and its development of the person. Yet everyone I know has been deeply affected by an immediate manager. It's the immediate manager who's managing your work, has your HR functions and other things. Such great source of power if that is an individual who can do that job well and can help someone see how to grow and develop. Unfortunately, a lot of managers haven't been mentored themselves. They themselves are not learning and growing from work, and they're ill-equipped to have those conversations.
And exactly why the heroine's journey had to fall on your head.
Yeah.
Because by falling it on your head, while initially we label it bad, something horrible that just happened to me, when you're 10 years out and you look back, you say, oh my God, that was one of the greatest gifts that could have ever happened to me. Because it disrupted your fixation, opened your toolbox, said, how the hell can I get myself out of this? Which required you to be creative and talented and no longer fail to look at reality. A divorce. I mean, you can be failing to look at reality like, oh, it's fine. I'll just wait this out. And then when it falls on your head, you're like, well, maybe that isn't the whole life I want to live. So you got a great gift in that.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that it doesn't have to go that far. If we listen to the small signs, we don't need to have the 2x4 to the side of the head. Right. So like if we listen to the small signs, an example, Erin, you asked, why don't people learn at work? In part, they are not acknowledging, I'm not happy here. I'm not having a good time. This is a crisis already, but we just instead we numb ourselves and we tolerate. And so instead of tolerate, what I advocate is transform. Looking at the ingredients of, what's available. Could I volunteer for a task force? Do I want to do this? Where do I have discretion in my job? What are my options? Exactly. And so flipping the trigger so that we start to look in that way doesn't have to be a terrible crisis. It could be. And sometimes that's the only thing that's going to do it. but in everyday life, we can do this for ourselves in a more compassionate way.
I was a hard nut to crack. It required a 2x4. And then when I tried to ignore it and pretend that I could engineer my own life, and life was saying, oh, no, 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 you cannot, you're not in control. Like, watch. You're supposed to be bigger and better and contribute more than you're able to see right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
And that has a component of faith, you know. I so appreciate this conversation, Joan and Aaron, and finding a way to talk about what's an inner experience of transformation. You know, as we go through our inner experience of transformation, then we build these exterior skills and our playing field increases. And hopefully, with that competence that we're building, then our confidence increases. And when that happens and we have more sense of ourselves, more sense of what we can do, we're better able to design circumstances where we thrive. And I think that, you know, there are so many women right now who are in a bad work situation for them, who are struggling because they don't have a manager who understands them. I think we need to stop expecting that our managers are going to do this for us and start asking ourselves to do it for us. And when we need help, we call on our colleagues. Peer-to-peer relationships are one of the strongest places that folks can go for that kind of collegial support to sort through what in this environment can I use to create the opportunity that works for the organization, works for the individual, works for my coworkers, and everybody wins. That mentality takes strength to hold, faith to hold, and then skill to build.
And I would say too that we need to embrace as women our inalienable God-given right to thrive.
Yes.
Because as
Yes.
women, we've been too ready to say, oh, I can endure this, or oh, you know, I shouldn't speak. We have a right to thrive. And that's
Yes.
what Heroine's journey is too. We have loved
Oh,
having you with us today.
this has been
We
just a
so,
I
pleasure.
actually, I know that we need to close it up, but I actually have one more question for Jessica that actually circles back to something that we're talking about at kind of at the very beginning, where you were talking about community and you were talking about groups and creating groups that were women centric, and then
Yes.
inviting men in, but making sure to keep the feminine, I guess if you want to call it that, collaborative environment.
Yes.
And the question that I had for you was, how do you keep that? Like,
Ah,
how do you
let me tell
too
you,
much.
you know, like
Too
there's
much.
some technical skill here as a facilitator. So, you know, there's the philosophical side of it, but let's talk about the facilitation techniques. First of all, women naturally self-censor, and we have a sense of wanting everyone to speak. That's thing number one, is making sure that the voices in the room are equal. And it tends that oftentimes you have a man who's either dominant or holds back. So finding a way to make sure that you have a whole circle of communication where the airtime is roughly equivalent. That's the first thing. And the second thing is looking at the nature of the topics. Where are they in the strata of down in the level of detail, at the level of planning, at the level of vision and strategy? What strata are we talking about? And making sure that the strata is connected to what the group's purpose is. So I often find that women have a sense of where do we need to focus this conversation to be most useful? Now, men have a sense of that too, but it's a question of what are we being useful to? What is it that, so as a woman, as a facilitator, as someone who hosts these kinds of groups, I want to make sure that we're clear about what we're holding our integrity to. And so if you give equal airtime and you clarify what are we being integrity, where are we holding ourselves to focus, those two things will really help maintain the spirit of a collaborative group, whatever genders are there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it was truly a pleasure.
Tell us again the name of your book, your most recent book.
The book is The Conscious Professional, and you can get a copy of the first chapter at consciousprofessional.com.
Okay.
And also, I wanted to mention about this conscious business women's circle, and I'm just recruiting right now for the first cohort. And if someone listening is interested in that, I would recommend emailing me. It's jessica@jessicahartung.com, and jessicahartung.com is where you usually find the information about me.
So glad to have you with us. And to all our listeners, thanks for being with us. We love it that you join us. Please go get your copy of The Heroine's Journey. And we will very much look forward to you joining us again next week. In the meantime, journey onward.
That is this week's episode of The Heroine's Journey. You can access the blog post for this episode along with other great resources at walkthejourney.com. Also, get your free ebook at walkthejourney.com so you can say goodbye to just surviving and turn into thriving. Join us next week for another fun, inspiring, and uplifting episode. If you love this episode, feel free to subscribe and give us a review on iTunes. Stay in touch on other social media platforms, Instagram and our Facebook group, both at The Heroine's Journey LLC. Until next time.